Hello everyone, welcome back to the second video from the Stories of Sodor week. As you know, today I'm here to share with you all my opinions on each season of the Stories of Sodor, as well as to rank them all from least favorite to favorite. And before we begin, I want to say that these are all my personal opinions. If you like a season or an episode better than me, then you don't need to get angry with me. And so, let's get started already. Season 1. When it comes to my least favorite season, it was not easy to choose. But I think season 1 for me is the least favorite one. But that doesn't mean it has no great stories. I liked a lot of them, especially Percy, Passengers, and Chaos. But I think the reason why season 1 is below all other seasons is because it includes episodes I don't really watch too often and skip them simply due because I don't really like them. And because I find them kind of boring. Some of these are Scrap, Ghost, Quarantine, Jinxed, and Luck. I'm not sure why, but these are episodes I am not always eager to watch again. But I think I must explain Ghost to you guys. Ghost is an episode, like I said, I don't always want to rewatch. This is simply because I don't like most Halloween stories, especially those that include Percy's Ghost Train theme. I don't like that piece of music so much. It's great, but I'm always reminded of scenes like Alfred jumpscaring the audience in Thomas 1, Edward 2, Henry 3's Night Express to Vickerstown and Revenge of the Ghost Train, which I completely hate. Or the first time I heard it in the episode itself. And so, I like Ghost, but it's still one of those I don't want to watch very often. Anyway, before we head to the next season, I, like in every season, want to share my least favorite, and standout episodes you guys should watch from this season. Least favorite episode, Jinxed. I'm not sure why, but I don't like quite a few narrow gauge episodes in Stories of Sodor. And this is one of them. I don't know why, but I simply am not into it. Favorite episode, Mainline, Carriages, or Sting. These three episodes are my personal favorite episodes, but I can't really decide which I like better. I like Mainline because of Thomas and Eric's heroic actions by bringing the woman to Ellswitch, and that the baby gets named after them.
Entonces mi hijo será llamado Thomas Eric Galindez. Then my son shall be called Thomas Eric Galindez.
In Carriages, I really like the part with Dominic and the adaptation of Breakvan, as well as the part of James and Douglas hating each other. I found that very nice. And then in Sting, I really enjoyed Jeffrey's part, which is most of the episode anyway. And I like how Jeffrey is caught. I think by saying this, I would say that Sting is my favorite episode of the three, for now at least. It could be any of the other two in a month or so. Standout episode, Ghost. Even if I don't like it as much as others, I think this episode, simply because of its setting during the night mostly, stands out among the others. But what I think really stands out even more is that this has the very first major accident in the series, which is already a really dramatic one. For those who don't know it, Edward and Thomas tell us that an engine named Arthur, who worked for the LMS, had a drastic accident while descending the Preston Incline. But he only had this accident because he was, like never before, late and tried to make up time. And now he appeared on Sodor as a ghost. And I really like the part of the engines trying to figure out a way to get rid of him. And what I also haven't understood yet, if it was ever really explained, I find it very interesting that Arthur returned as a ghost, but not as himself, but looking like Timothy in the Ghost Train. I think that's what mostly sticks out to me a lot too. And with that, let's get to the next season. Season 3. Now this next one was a hard decision, and I thought a bit about it, until I got to this result. I think Season 3 is not as great as Season 5. But I do like all of the stories, which are all in this season focused on new things we never saw happening before. like getting a new controller for the railway, or having a trial, or the closure of a whole railway, or building the P-Rodwood branch line. This season is fully packed with new stuff we never knew. But why I think Season 3 is not as great as Season 5 personally is because I find them a bit boring or too long. I'm not sure how I can explain it. This season has a lot of moments where we are just watching it and Edward explains to us some history about something or someone, such as how the Topham Hatt became controller or how nationalization affected British Railway. I find such stories to be a bit boring, but these are still not bad episodes at all. They're just for me a bit boring to watch. Obviously, however, it's not every episode. There are quite a few I enjoy watching from time to time when I'm rewatching the series, such as replacements, books, choices, or actually, which I would have never said about 3 years ago, amens. Why? Well, simply because of the scenes of Alfred and Geoffrey at the harbor and when he warned Geoffrey. It just reminds me of ghost stories and such, and therefore I never liked it much. But now, after my latest rewatch, I think I start to enjoy this episode a lot. I mean, it isn't the only plot of the episode anyway. Least favorite episode: Aftermath. Aftermath is an episode I don't like very much. Not only because of the scene of Edward at Chat 17, no, I just feel like this is an episode that falls into this category I made earlier about explaining new things or expanding upon them, and that's why I find it boring for the rest of the episode. Except for when Adam found out the POWs were not the ones, or not the only ones on board that coach. I did quite enjoy this part. Favorite episode: Choices. It was hard to choose between choices, reshuffle, books, extension or closure, but I said it with choices. The plot of the episode is actually very simple. With, who was owned by the Barrow Scrapyard I think, to be its and Barrow's station pilot, was asked if he would like to retire from railway services. But he says no, and then decides if he couldn't work at Barrow anymore, then there's one way he can end his life, so to say. And that is that he volunteered for target practice. Luckily for him, the Navy missed all 3 shots, and he would be bought by Sir Topham Hatt to work on the Farquhar branch line. The reason I like this episode is because I like Worth as the character, but also the way he wanted to come to an end. I loved it so much. Standout episode: Trial. While I don't watch it very often, I think this is a standout episode of the season, for multiple reasons. For once, we get to know that Peter, during World War II, took a goods train and then shot an entire hospital, which was never stated to occur throughout the Stories of War miniseries. Secondly, we never saw a trial happening before in the Stories of Sodor towards an engine. And thirdly, Peter is sentenced to go to Railgate for the longest time an engine would ever be sent to. 15 years. Which is just crazy. Usually engines could only get 30 days. But 15 years? Man, that must have been a very, very tough run for Peter. Season 5. And here is the season I was thinking about whether or not it's a bit better than Season 3 or not. And as I said it already, it is. Season 5 of the Stories of Sodor is a season which does a lot of things. Unfortunately, what I could also sometimes tell by viewers that it was a little bit too much in such a short running time. That being 10 episodes instead of the usual 15. I think Season 5 might have worked a little bit better with 12 episodes, but it's still a great season. Season 5 does however have many great, but also a bit weaker episodes in my opinion. Ones I really enjoyed were Competition, Preservation and actually Munitions. But, as I said, weaker episodes do exist. Here are some I feel are very off in this season, which I think makes them a bit weaker. Enthusiasts. While I do enjoy all episodes, I think this is one that feels completely off from the rest. It's the only episode that doesn't really have any relation to another episode in the season except for this line at the very beginning.
The new bridge enabled more of them to visit Sodor.
It just focuses on enthusiasts which then cause a man to die and that's it. Maybe it would have worked a bit better if it was somewhat connected to episodes like Vandalism. Because of Jeffrey's death, the railway was a bit hard pressed to keep up with the schedule. But then, when the new road bridge was opened, it was even harder. And when Wilbert would come to Sodor, it gets even worse. And then include scenes of engines being a bit overworked or something like that. Maybe that could have been a bit better? I don't know. But that's just my opinion, of course. Again, it's still a great episode. Preservation is also mostly the same. I mean, I like watching this episode a lot, but this just comes out of nowhere. This episode focuses on Clive, Neil and Matthew retiring from regular services and building a heritage railway at Marston Heights and its coal mine, and Kate being relocated to the Little Western. I mean, this episode worked more into the season, that being that Kate is now in the Little Western and it plays out over to the next episode, Training. I mean, that is definitely much better than Furious, but again, this comes out of nowhere, which I find so random. But again, I like watching it, as it's also again a great episode nonetheless. Least favorite episode, Fallout. Fallout is the only episode in season 5 that I for some reason don't like watching. This is why I never watched season 5 from shortly after its release till a few days ago. I guess it's mainly because of Thomas and Mickey's death in this episode, which I don't like to be reminded of very much. But I still enjoy this episode again, just not a very big fan of it. Favorite episode, Competition. This is by far my favorite episode. Not only because I like the adaptation of biology in this, but also that this episode focuses primarily on the road, which was something I believe never happened before in the stories of Sodor. The road was always a part of it, but I think it was never in the primary spotlight. I also like Onslow a lot. He's probably my favorite new character this season. Standout episode, Rescued and Experiment. It was not easy to choose from all episodes, but I think these stick out the most to me. In Rescued, Neil bumps into an engine meant to be scrapped, when it suddenly wakes up. This engine would be Barry, and we get to know that he was given green water 7 years earlier, and ever since then he was in a coma, I would say, and that's something I find very interesting. An engine that was, so to say, sleeping for 7 years is crazy. And then an experiment, Barry is tested out with a new experiment by Robert Hole, which would be that steam engines would be transferred to a diesel by fitting a motor inside the tenders or smoke box, I guess, which would later turn out to be a big success. And I find that very interesting as well. Turning a steam engine into a diesel is something I never thought of, but it makes sense as otherwise coal would be needed to be transported to Sodor via rail or ship ever since the closure of Marston Heights coal mine. I mean, it takes away the feeling of them being steam, which is what makes them stand out, but again, Sodor should also be up to date with something, at least I guess. Okay, we now come to the top 3 seasons. Which do you think is my favorite, and which are my second and third favorite? Let me know your top 3 seasons of the stories of Sodor. And so, number 3 goes to Season 2. Season 2 is my third favorite season, and here's why. Season 2 might be the first season in the stories of Sodor where I enjoy watching every episode. Usually until now, there was at least one episode I didn't really like to watch, but for Season 2, it's not the case. I like them all, and there are so many great stories this season. From Duck returning in a direct adaptation of Gordon and the Famous Visitor, to a quite unexpected inspection by the Topham Hatt himself, which may end up that one of the two companies gets removed, which, after they're all proven themselves in thief, doesn't happen, and both stay on the island. Then we get Trapped. I think my favorite episode of the season. I love this episode so much. I could probably watch it every other day or so. And my goodness, then there is Strike, Sabotage and Smuggling. 3 episodes I also love. I like how Trouble in the Shed, Trust Thomas and the Flying Kipper are adapted here. And Smuggling is also a great episode, which focuses on something that is still common to this day. Then there's also a Furnace, Prejudice, Maintenance, Shunting, and Parade. All of these episodes are just great. We get to learn how Edward came to Sodor, what happens when the British Union is around causing trouble, and that every year a parade will be held on the island, which are all great stories idea, but that's not the best of the bunch. Shunted saw the introduction of Bertie, probably my favorite non-whale character, and immediately we got an adaptation of Thomas and Bertie, my favorite episode of season 1 as well. But as you may have noticed, I have skipped over several episodes, which I want to cover now. Armament and Affection. Both are stories which cover the topic which is new around this time, preparation for war, which would happen later that year, and I find it a very interesting topic, but I guess it was so in real life too with the engines helping out. But then there's Spectre. This is the only episode in this season to focus on something scary. In it, Dominic, aka the spiteful brake van, now takes revenge on the engines by letting the brake vans disappear, or trains being delayed and killing a guard. And then the engines go on a hunt for him, and Douglas then sends him back to hell, which I like a lot. Least favorite episode, Prejudice. As I like all episodes a lot, it was hard to choose, but I think I go with Prejudice simply because I think it's the only episode of the season to maybe get a bit boring. At least the beginning. The second part, where David Becker, the station master of Southwood, gets into a fight with the British Union or Blackshirts, which is not boring at all. And I'm always eager to see if he survived or not, even though I know he did. Favorite episode, Trapped. While I did say my favorite road vehicle, Bertie, is introduced this season and has a great episode together with the plot of Kate playing a trick on Diesel and then them all being shunted, I think Trapped is my favorite episode of the season. The episode is about the engines trying to move a boulder, whose name was Bob, from the railway line, eventually succeeding by blowing it up. I especially love Gordon, Henry, Colin and Diesel in this. I think Gordon and Diesel are the funniest here.
And what are we supposed to do, Toby? Just waltz on up to the boulder and ask if it wouldn't mind moving aside? No joke, Thomas. I almost got squished. Huh. Could have been worse. Oi! Yeah, sure. You go gawk at the giant boulder and leave me to do all the work. Kuh. Ain't that the way of it? Then again, maybe it would be reckless to do anything. What a surprise. It didn't work. If only someone had seen this. Everything is just smashing on this side, Thomas. Okay, Thomas, I've got your crane. Had to go all the way to Kildane for it. Let's see how well this doesn't work. What the? Oh no.
Standout episode, Thief. I think Thief is the episode that sticks out the most, even from Spectre, simply because it's the first time we see an engine stealing a few trains or goods to save a friend. I also like that Riff is a secondary character in this beside Thomas, who is the main character I guess, and that they all pair up to find the thief. The funniest group I think is Adam and Eric. I couldn't help but laugh at their parts.
We do occupy quite the tactical position here. What's that mean? Tactical? It means thinking strategically. What's that mean? What you said? Lord give me strength. Just as I predicted. 6 hours of observation and nothing. Hold on. What? I think I heard something. Well, you were the only one. It came from the yard. Maybe it's the thief. I'm gonna go look. Oi, thief! I beg your pardon, Eric. Where do you get off calling me a common criminal? Gordon? You're the thief? Of course I'm not the thief, you imbecile. Well, since we don't need the flare anymore, I'll push it out the way. Wait, Eric! It's still live! Wow, look at that! Nicely done, you twit! Top form as always, Eric. Sorry. Well, at least we know the flares were working, eh?
Now, which season of the two left is the best and second best? Well, the second best season of the Stories of Sodor is Season 4B. Yes, I like Season 4B the second best. Like with Season 2 already, I enjoyed watching almost every single episode, with one exception. But even with that one exception, I think Season 4B is still a better season than Season 2, but not as great as Season 4A. This season starts off strong with animosity, where Doug and Oliver finally arrive on Sodor to build a new branch line north to Waterton together with the Farquhar crew. But when Oliver has an accident based on Oliver Rounds Up, Diesel arrives to replace him. And that annoys Doug and Percy so much that eventually Diesel would delay the project a lot. But then at the end we learn that he volunteered to go there, which is a great character development, from him being rude and not very helpful to now volunteering to go there even if he knows Doug is there, an engine he doesn't get along with at all. And that is something I totally love already. But then the season continues with 3 narrow gauge episodes, these being Expansion, Creature and Lamp. What happens in these is basically that the Scarlet Railway would expand into the Nardwin Valley, and also Rusty finally arrives on Sodor as well. But the expansion is set back because of Andrea's death caused by Duncan and improperly stored munitions, a creature known as the Nardwin killing workmen, and a boulder who rolls along the railway destroying massive amount of things it comes across. I really love Expansion and Lamp, but not Creature actually. Creature is the episode I mentioned I don't like too much, simply because I am in fact a bit scared of it and what it does. Therefore, it's definitely my least favorite episode. The rest of the season, however, is great again, especially Dieselization and Return, which not introduce introduced Daisy, Salty and Derek, but also D199 or Francis already, and bring back 2 characters we haven't seen for a while, Peter and Boko. And then also it introduces a character we knew existed but haven't heard anything about yet, Brian. Brian is such a great and interesting character who has so much history to share. I mean, he is alive even though he was bombed during the 40s. Like, what? How is that possible? And therefore I love his character a lot, and that he returned to Sodor. Least favorite episode, Creature. Like I stated already, Creature is my least favorite episode, and since I talked about it already, let's move on. Favorite episode, Dieselization. Dieselization is my personal favorite episode of Season 4B, simply because I love all the characters. Daisy, Derek, Francis, Salty and the steam engines in this one. Like, whoa, I have talked about it already a bit, so let's go on to standard episode, Beaching or Creature. I think Beaching is a standard episode because until now, no real life famous people except Audrey visited Sodor before, and I think Beaching is a very known man even to this day among railways or Britain as a whole. And then, with what he decided to cut on Sodor is interesting. Like, he closed so many yards and depot, as well as turning the Farquhar branch line into an industrial line, which is something I would have never seen coming, simply because Thomas is so famous, it doesn't make sense for his line to close, but I guess it still can. And I also think Creature is a standout episode of the season because it focuses on a Nardwin, which was never stated to exist in general prior to the expansion of the Scarlet Railway, and it being a monster by killing so many workmen, and that is something completely new to the Stories of Sodor, so I think that is a standout, even if I personally don't like to watch it. And now, here's my favorite season, Season 4A. Season 4A is by far my favorite season of the Stories of Sodor. I like every single episode a lot. This season is so great. I will forever like this the most. Not only are my favorite 2 episodes of the stories on Sodor in it, Diesel and Modernization, but it also is a season where Bill and Ben are introduced and my favorite episode of Thomas and Janeway is adapted, The Diesel. But there's also Murdoch's and Harold's introduction, both great characters. Then there's also Joshua and Boko who are introduced as well, and I love their appearances here so much. Then there are also episodes like Secrets, in which we get to know why Sheffield is the way he is. And then there's Diagnosis, the saddest and funniest episode of the season. This is the episode I mentioned where Bill and Ben get introduced to help and reopen the China clay pits again. But then in the second half we see that Adam has meta fatigue, but not just a little bit. And then he decides to go with his final firing, which was just so surprising, and at the end we see exactly that. And this is a very sad moment, simply because we never had such a scene before, that an engine decided to have his final firing. And the reason the episode is also the funniest is because of Bill and Ben and how they are introduced. I enjoyed that a lot. Murdoch's episode is great too. Him being selfish and thinks he is above everyone. I just love it. Least favorite episode, Mountain. Mountain is the episode where a new railway is introduced to the island, the Kaidi Mountain Railway. During the episode, we see the railway being built and the engines and rolling stock arriving. And we also get to know that there are also ghosts haunting the mountains. The reason I don't like this is simply because I find this the most boring episode of them all this season. But I actually don't know why. I just find it boring for some reason. So for me, it's my least favorite episode from this season. Favorite episode, Diesel or Modernization. Like I said, these are both my favorite episodes of the entire series, so it wasn't surprising they are here now. I love Diesel because of the background story Doug and Diesel seem to have together already, way before Diesel would arrive on Sodor, which I find cool that they knew each other from Diesel's very first day and not on Sodor. And I like that Diesel takes Doug's advice but presents them like he made them up, which I love. Also, I love that engines in general have names and not just numbers, like Diesel, who is now also known as Bruce. Very interesting idea. But again, I also love Modernization. Again, this episode focuses on Murdoch's introduction to the stories of Sodor, and him being selfish and against the outdated engines that work on the railway, and that he doesn't like to get help. I also like just what he says to the engines and Gordon's Hill.
What a silly name for a hill!
Most times I can't stop laughing at them because I find them funny for some reason. I also like that Henry thinks he wants to prove himself, even if Murdoch was already working for 6 or 7 years. I just love this episode. Every character in it is just great. Standout episode, Diagnosis. I think Diagnosis is the standout episode of the season, because, like I said, it is the very first time we see an engine choosing the final firing, which is a way for them to end their life. Just for that, I would recommend it alone. But then the rest of the episode being on Bill and Ben's arrival and them being or doing silly things is again just great. So I think you should definitely check out this episode. And with that, we finally reached the end of this video. I hope you all enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you will look forward to the other 2 videos coming this week and the next week when I upload a massive amount of videos. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on my decisions and what you would have chosen, and have a good rest of your day.